In this video, I want to talk about my new camera that I just bought and my latest photo walk that I did with that camera yesterday. So, as you might have noticed, I am back doing photography videos, but I'm doing mostly street photography, which is a completely new thing for me. And I really enjoy exploring that and learning that, and I enjoy sharing that journey with you guys as I'm going along. In the first few photo walks I've done as a street photographer, I've used my Sony A9 II camera, which is great because it's very small and compact. It still is a full frame camera. It can give you shallow depth of field with a pretty small lens, something that I like. I like the aesthetic of having a short, shallow depth of field. But one issue I've had with the Sony A9 II is that the shutter sound, it is pretty loud, and that feels a bit uncomfortable for me as a new street photographer because I don't want to draw attention to myself when I'm snapping photos, often with people in them. So I really wanted a way to take photos more silently. And yeah, I tried the electronic shutter on the A9 II, and unfortunately that camera has a pretty slow readout speed on the sensor, so you get a heavy rolling shutter effect most of the time, or like very often. So I started looking into other options. And I wanted to stick with Sony full frame. I want a full frame camera for street photography because I want to be able to have shallow depth of field. And I have a lot of Sony lenses, so it would be nice to keep within that system. And when I look at the different cameras that Sony offer that has fast readout speeds, meaning you can use electronic shutter and not get a rolling shutter effect, there are not that many options. The main options are the A9 series, A9 I, A9 II, A9 III, and the A1 mostly. And these are very expensive cameras. And usually I'm not comfortable buying a camera which is more than like $3,000. I just don't want to spend that much money on a camera, and I don't like the feeling of carrying around something that expensive. But I really wanted a more silent camera. So I went on MPB, which is a site for used cameras, and I found that the used prices on the A9 series of Sony cameras are pretty decent. And at MPB you can also trade in old gear. So that's exactly what I did. I traded in some old lenses valued at around $2,000, and in exchange I got this, the Sony A9 Mark II. And it's not mint condition. If you look closely you can see maybe some scratches here and there, but it is in good condition. One thing I also noticed was that it has probably been used quite a bit because the buttons feel a little bit mushier than on a new camera. But that's not a big deal for me. I mean, $2,000 roughly for this camera, I would say, is very, very good value for money. These cameras come in at much more than that new. I mean, the latest A9 Mark III with a global shutter, I think it's like $9,000 or something like that. And yeah, I'm not really prepared to pay that kind of money for a camera, at least not right now. Also, like, I wanted to explore if this camera is something I like or not. You can never know unless you have used it for a while. So I figured it would be good to buy this used. And yesterday I went out for the first time with this camera, snapping some photos around in Stockholm. And man, I really love this camera. I don't think I've ever fallen this deeply in love with a new camera this quickly before. It really has everything I've been looking for. The viewfinder is extremely sharp, extremely fast and responsive. It almost feels like looking through an optical viewfinder. And it's so nice when I have taken a few photos to be able to review them by looking in the viewfinder and actually seeing kind of what the picture looks like, because it's high resolution. Funny thing is that I think the resolution of this viewfinder is actually the same as on the A7 IV that I used to own earlier, but for whatever reason, this viewfinder to me feels higher quality. Not sure why, and also it feels like snappier. Really excellent experience. And also the ability to use electronic shutter to be completely silent when taking photos. It is so nice. In the beginning it feels weird not to have any feedback when I'm snapping photos. Yeah, you can enable like a sound effect that sounds like a shutter, but I mean the reason I bought this camera is to be able to be silent, so I turned that off. The only confirmation you get when you take a photo is like a small frame showing up on the screen, and in the beginning it feels weird. You're used to that feedback, the camera shaking slightly, the sound, but pretty quickly I got used to it, and also pretty quickly I started to love the feeling of just snapping photos with the electronic shutter. It feels lighter in some way, it's hard to explain. And also the autofocus on this camera is extremely fast, extremely accurate. So like from when you press the shutter and acquire autofocus to when the picture is taken, that time is very, very, very small. Also, I really love the buttons and the button arrangement on this camera. I love that you have a wheel up here to set the drive mode if you want to take a fast series or just single shots. It's nice to have a mechanical way of selecting that easily. Otherwise, like the body is pretty similar to the A7 IV camera. I really love the whole feeling of using this camera, and I considered at first to buy the A9 Mark I because that one is cheaper and it's pretty similar to this camera, but the biggest difference between the two is that the A9 Mark II has this newer body with much better ergonomics. And I remember I had the old body in the A7 III, and I remember that I really hated the way the grip was a bit too short for my hand. So yeah, I spent a couple $100 more to get this more modern body. And also another important difference between the A9 Mark I and Mark II is that the Mark II has a faster chip inside it, so the whole camera feels a bit faster, and that is also something I enjoy a lot. The only major downside with this camera, I would say, is that it still has the old Sony menu system. You might know about it. It is pretty terrible compared to the new system that you have on the newest Sony cameras. But I mean, to be honest, it's not like a big deal for me because I've been using this old system for many years earlier, so I'm pretty used to it. So yeah, as long as you set up the camera the way you like it, yeah, it's not a big issue, I think. Yesterday I went out to test this camera for the first time. I spent a few hours walking around in Stockholm, snapping photos, and right now you're looking at some of my favorites from yesterday. I don't think I got any photo that was like a real banger, something I'm super proud of. They are mostly just okay, I would say. But I think I did pretty well considering the dark, gloomy, gray weather we had yesterday. The light wasn't that interesting. I also noticed when I go through the pictures that most of the pictures with people in them is people's backs. And this tells me something important, that I still feel uncomfortable shooting people like head on so that they can see that I'm taking a photo of them. I need to practice on that. I need to get comfortable with that, I think. Because, I mean, in most cases people don't care that you photograph them, and as a street photographer you really need to have that confidence to be able to shoot people from the front. Then, I mean, my main interest in taking these photos is not to picture human emotions or faces or like taking portraits. I'm just looking to make aesthetically pleasing compositions and photos. No matter if I'm doing macro photography as I did earlier or if I'm doing street photography, I just want to make nice looking photos. And for that you often don't need to have someone's face in it. It can be enough with an interesting shape, a silhouette of some kind. But I still want to get more comfortable shooting people's faces, because that means I will take more photos overall. I won't hesitate as much taking photos, and that means that I probably will get more keepers in the end. That's it for this little update about my street photography journey. I know I haven't posted in a while. I've been sick for a week and then I was traveling for a week, but now I'm back and I hope to post more regularly. That is my ambition. And yeah, see you soon again in the next video.